that being said, I'm Rafael Molina. I'm the Deputy District Director for the Division of Traffic Operations, Department of Transportation, better known as Caltrans, more specifically District 7, which encompasses both Los Angeles and Ventura counties. So before we get into the presentation, before I introduce tonight's first distinguished speaker, I'd like to take a moment to thank the City of Bell for hosting us this evening. So thank you to them. And so with that, I do have some acknowledgements to make as before I introduce the first speaker. First, I'd like to thank Cynthia Morales with Congresswoman's Lucille Roybal-Allard's office. Next, there's Alejandra Zelaya. She's from Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon's office. And we also have Councilmember Marco Barcena from Bell Gardens here with us as well. Additionally, present in the Community Center with Bell Gardens, we have Mr. Gatano Karecki. He's one of my colleagues. He's the deputy with the Division of Maintenance. He also happens to be the ambassador, as we call it, for the City of Bell, looking to assist them in managing our bureaucracy at Caltrans. So with that, it is my distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce to you Assemblymember Cristina Garcia, representing District 58. Without her leadership and support, tonight's event would not have been possible. So with that, please welcome to the stage, Assemblymember Garcia. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody, and thank you for being here. For a lot of us, this is our first public meeting, and we're both a little bit rusty and a little bit nervous, but excited that we're able to be here together. I want to thank Caltrans for their partnership with this event and really for their partnership in improving the safety for our community and the timeliness with which they've responded to this request out there. And so I want to recognize that. Last year in August, I requested funding for this project to make improvements to the 710 Florence Avenue interchange for many reasons. It's not safe for pedestrians, it's not safe for drivers, and it's not safe for cyclists. As I rode my scooter from Bell Gardens over the bridge to Bell, I was reminded of how unsafe it is and how it feels a little bit like Frogger when you're crossing that area there. And so as we are continuing to encourage Californians to walk, to ride the bus, to get out of their cars, to be outside and find cleaner ways of mobility, we need to make sure that we also ensure that they have safe infrastructure to travel with. The freeway defines a lot of our lives, and it's a major route for goods movements in our community, and there's emissions, health, and infrastructure costs of trucks moving by here 24/7, and we've seen that only exacerbated during this pandemic and with the port congestion out there as well. And so it's more important than ever that we work on those improvements to this intersection. A few years ago, I'd given a tour of my district to Governor Jerry Brown, and we parked across the street from this intersection. And as we started to walk, he was excited to get out of his car after we had driven around for a couple of hours. But once we got past the first on-ramp, his security team stopped us, telling me that it was too unsafe for the governor to continue. And I said, well, we have actually 3 more to cross before you get to the other side of town, which was our intention. But I think it was a moment for him and his team to realize what we have to deal with on a regular basis for many of our constituents out there. I've taken other leaders on that tour, including the Secretary of the Cal EPA, Jerry Blumenfeld, as well. And as I've taken more and more individuals, it's become more of a sense of urgency to ensure that we actually take action out there. So I want to make sure that we have an interchange that works for pedestrians, for cyclists, for motorists, and for the goods movements out there. And I am confident that with the help of the community and the help of Caltrans, we can achieve that in the near future out there as well. And so I am excited for this investment, I am excited for this work, but mostly I'm excited for all of the constituents who are joining us to give input to ensure that whatever solution we're crafting is community-driven as well. It's taken decades for us to start to call attention to these locations, but I'm happy that we are finally working on that as well. Le quiero dar las gracias a todos los que están participando con nosotros, sea aquí presente o en la computadora, y gracias por participar en crear un área donde podamos caminar, estar en la bicicleta y viajar en una manera más segura. Esta salida del 710 en realidad está muy peligrosa y así ha sido toda nuestra vida, pero con su ayuda y con la ayuda de Caltrans estamos hoy empezando el proceso para mejorar esa área para todos. Entonces también le quiero dar las gracias al equipo de Caltrans que empezando de agosto ahora han trabajado arduamente para mover este proceso rápido, pero en una manera que incluya la voz de la comunidad también. Entonces muchas gracias a ustedes y tengo mucho ánimo y mucha emoción de empezar este proceso y estar aquí con ustedes. And so I would like to introduce Gloria Roberts, Caltrans Chief Deputy for District 7, Director, for some remarks. And again, thank the Caltrans team for their efforts on this adventure we're taking together.
Thank you, Assemblymember Garcia and your team, and the community of Bell for welcoming us, for giving Caltrans the opportunity to engage with you on what you would like to see at the 710 Florence Avenue interchange. We are so grateful for the foresight of Assemblymember Garcia in providing to us the $5 million earmark funds to kickstart improvements at this particular interchange. Caltrans does have a complete streets policy that prioritizes safety for those of us who travel by foot and bike, or even by scooter, as well as with cars. And we want to make sure that there are connected paths and routes to support safe travel. So tonight, the Caltrans team will be providing you a variety of options this evening to see what's possible out there, to see what it is that you would like to see in your community. Ultimately, we want to hear from you. And so without further ado, I'll turn this back over to Rafael Molina, our Deputy District Director of Operations. Thank you.
All right, so now let's talk about tonight's topics. First, I'll be discussing what the short-term bike and pedestrian safety improvements will look like. So these are things that Caltrans is working on right now. Next, one of my colleagues, she'll be discussing the midterm bike and pedestrian safety improvements at that location. And lastly, we're going to talk about the long-term interchange improvements. And at the end, as I mentioned previously, we're going to have an opportunity for an open dialogue. All right, so let's talk about the short-term improvements. So one of the things that we're working on right now is we're looking to add a variety of different types of signage to all the on-ramps and off-ramps at this interchange. We're going to be adding warning signs like the yellow signs that are shown on the screen in front of you, and regulatory signs as well, in addition to pavement markings. The image to the far right kind of shows you the rough approximation as far as where these signs are going to be placed, but I think you can get a better image as far as what that will look like here. So this is one of the off-ramps there. So as cars exit the ramp, they'll see the warning signs there. As you get closer to the crosswalk, we will use pavement delineation, so informing motorists that they need to yield. Additionally, there will be some regulatory signage there that will be requiring them to yield to pedestrians as you get closer to the crosswalk as shown there. You can see there too that we'll be adding some warning signs to further provide visibility of the fact that to motorists, the fact that we have bicyclists and pedestrians in the area. Similarly, we're going to do the same thing for a typical off-ramp. This here shows the different types of signs that we will be including here. Again, this is what it might look like in the field. This is obviously an approximation just to give you an idea in terms of what it will look like. Again, we're adding the warning signs as well as the regulatory signage here as well. As I indicated, these are things we're actively working on right now. In fact, we already placed the order for the signs at the end of January. Since these signs are actually custom manufactured, we anticipate that they will be in our possession within the next 3 months or so, after which we will expedite their installation. So with that, that kind of touches base with regards to what we're doing today as far as the short-term improvements. Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Sumei Tan. She's the Chief of the Office of Corridor Management South within the Division of Traffic Operations at Caltrans District 7. Sumei, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sumei Tan. Like Rafael said, I'm also part of the traffic operations team with Caltrans. Thank you, everyone, for being here, Assemblymember, our Chief Deputy, and everyone in the audience with us today and online. Today, I'll be sharing with you the midterm improvements that Caltrans are proposing to further enhance safety at the 710 and Florence Avenue interchange. So these midterm improvements will be made possible by the $5 million earmark help secured by Assemblymember Garcia for the community. So thank you, Assemblymember Garcia. We will be using these funds to further improve safety. And when we knew about this funding opportunity, the various Caltrans teams, we got together. We think about what can we do to further enhance safety for bicyclists and pedestrians at these intersections. And this list that I'll be sharing with you today is not final. These are the ideas that the Caltrans team came up with. I'm sorry, I want to make sure you can hear me. But we are here to get the community feedback, understand your needs, and we'll determine what the final list of proposal will be. Now, if we can't do everything the community needs with this $5 million earmark, we'll be making sure we'll be studying those and considering them in the long-term improvements that will also be discussed later on in this presentation. So without further ado, let me go into the improvements. So the first thing that we're proposing, as you can see on the slides, are the green shadow pavement markings. So these green shadow pavement markings, as you can see, are very bright. They really will alert the motorists of the presence of bicyclists in the roadway. In addition to the pavement markings, we are also proposing regulatory and warning signs. As you can see, the black and white regulatory sign, it says past 3 feet minimum. So these kind of signs are enforceable by law. So we believe they will be very effective in making sure that motorists comply with the regulations and keep a distance of at least 3 feet from their vehicle to the bicyclist. The second thing we're proposing is something that we call the pedestrian crosswalk system. As you can see, most of the crossings right now at the intersections already have marked crosswalk in the type of leather. They call leather crossing because they are the black and white that resemble leather. The system itself consists of various features. The most important one to me is the LED enhanced flashing pedestrian sign. You may have seen this sign in your city or in other neighborhood. So the thing for this sign is the lights will only come on flashing when the push button is pushed by the pedestrian. So this is what we call pedestrian actuated sign and lighting. So normally when something is constantly flashing, sometimes motorists would just get used to them and not pay so much attention. So it is important for us to have a feature that the light will only come on when it's actually called. That way, motorists will pay extra attention to it. And this light is automatically dimmed based on ambient light. So when it's bright, it will be bright. When it's dark, it will be dimmed slightly. So it won't be so bright that causes another issue for motorists. And these lightings are powered by solar panel that will deliver power up to 30 days. So it is more sustainable and they require much maintenance. In addition to the visual impact, it is very important for us to have something that we call pedestrian accessible system. So what it is it's a push button equipped with voice messages and visual impacts. So these voice messages are really, really important for the pedestrians who are visually impaired because they can't rely on what they see, so they would have to hear the voice messages.
Wait.
And the speaker for these voice messages are weather resistant. So we don't have to worry about them not working when it's raining or when the weather is not good. Here's another look at the whole system. In addition to the light along the perimeter of the sign, we are also installing something we call illuminator, which are the higher and brighter light that will illuminate the entire crosswalk. So this will really improve visibility at night, as you can see. And the illuminator will be activated at the same time as the LED enhanced light. So it's an effective system. So when there's no pedestrian, it's not going to be on. When a pedestrian comes, it will lighten up the whole crosswalk, and it will be very, very effective to improve safety to let motorists know of the presence of pedestrian in the crosswalk. Another thing we're considering is something we call lane configuration movement. What this is basically, we look for opportunity to shorten crosswalk for pedestrian. So the logic behind that is a shorter crosswalk means less distance and less exposure for the pedestrian to cross. So the Caltrans operation team, they went out to the field during peak hours when it was very busy. They spent hours there. They look at the traffic pattern. They look at the operation. They try to find out if any of these ramps are underused, and we can maybe take away one lane. without impacting the operation on Florence Avenue, because we don't want to do that as well. And my team found out that the eastbound Florence to northbound 710 currently has 2 lanes, and one of the lanes is actually under use. And by removing that lane, we will not be impacting traffic on Florence Avenue. So we're proposing to change the number of lanes from 2 lanes to 1 lane at this on-ramp. That will provide a shorter and safer crossing for pedestrians. We will also be upgrading all the curb ramps to improve accessibility for people with disability. As you can see, the pictures with the yellow pad, they're called detectable warning surfaces, and they have those raised, truncated dome. So those textures are important to let the people with impaired vision know of the curb ramp and the different grade between the street and the sidewalk. We want to make sure the system that we're putting in are accessible and safe for everyone, including the people with disability. Since we'll be working on the bridge, we'll also take the opportunity to upgrade the guardrails to current standard to make it safer for vehicles as well. This next item that I'm sharing with you is the most significant in terms of cost and complexity in construction, because it involves widening of a bridge. So we are proposing to widen the sidewalk on the bridge on both sides of Florence Avenue from the existing 5 feet to 6 feet. Oftentimes, when the sidewalk is really narrow, a pedestrian may not feel comfortable or safe because they're close to the adjacent traffic. So by widening the sidewalk, we hope that pedestrians will feel more comfortable, safer, and with that, we hope to encourage more people walking instead of driving. But this work involves structural work, hence it's the most costly and the most complex. We will also be upgrading the bridge fencing. As you can see, these fences look pretty old, so we'll make sure we upgrade them as well. So the list that I just showed, like I said, is not the final list. It's the idea that we came up with, and we want to share with you, and we want to hear what you think. And at the end of the presentation, we want to hear your feedback. But before we do that, Ms. Tina San from our team will be talking about long-term improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumay. So, slight change of plans. I just have some acknowledgements to make before we have our next speaker, Tina San. I'd like to acknowledge City of Bell Vice Mayor Ana Marie Quintana. She's present, so thank you for being here. We also have council members from the City of Bell, Ali Saleh, as well as Monica Arroyo. Also not present, but attending virtually, we also have Viviana Gomez. She's representing Supervisor Janice Hahn's office. And so with that, thank you to all for attending either in person or via WebEx. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Tina San. She's with the Office of Complete Streets and Climate Change. So Tina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafael. As Rafael has introduced me, I'm Tina San. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the long-term improvements that we're planning to study and for the future of 710 in Florence. So this long-term improvement project is planned to be funded through the State Highway Operations Protection Program, which is SHOP. And this program is a major funding source for many of Caltrans projects. And while the scope of the long-term improvement has not been completely finalized yet, there are 2 sample design concepts that we are planning to study. And one of those includes the bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing, and also the interchange reconfiguration. Depending on the outcome of these studies, Caltrans will determine which alternative will be the best suited based on your needs and what we want to hear from you today for all of the recommendations that we are presenting. So one of these first concepts is a bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing. which would most likely be the north or to the south of 710 freeway. And on the screen, you can see an example of a concept at US 101 and Ralston Avenue in the city of Belmont, up in the Bay Area. So as you can see in the picture in the left, in the red outlined, you can see the bridge. It crosses over the US 101 freeway and eventually connects back to the local street at Ralston Avenue. If an overcrossing like this is chosen as the long-term improvement project, the bridge would allow people to safely and more conveniently and comfortably walk and bicycle over the 710 freeway on a separated path away from cars. The second concept that we are studying is an interchange reconfiguration at 710 and Florence Avenue. And an interchange reconfiguration is really a redesign of where cars can access the freeway and also exit. So what you see here is an example of an interchange reconfiguration that was done by Caltrans in the Bay Area as well at US 101 Willow Road. So on the left-hand side is an image of the before picture of the before the reconfiguration. So this image was taken from May 2017. And with the reconfiguration project, Caltrans changed the configuration from a full cloverleaf shape design to a partial cloverleaf design that you'll see to the right of your screen. So the before image of US 101 and Willow Road is very similar to how the 710 and Florence Freeway is currently configured, where there are 4 locations at which a pedestrian or a bicyclist have to cross the freeway ramps. So if an interchange reconfiguration like this was done for 710 Florence and a partial cloverleaf design was determined to be the best option, then we would effectively be reducing the amount of crossings at the freeways from 4 locations to 2 locations on either side of the road. And what this type of project would improve is safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, as it reduces the number of crossings that someone would have to take, and also these conflict points with cars turning onto or off of the freeway. And so these 2 concepts that I recently went over are preliminary recommendations that plan to be further studied. The actual design has to be determined during project development and may evolve depending on what we hear from you all today. So that concludes the end of our presentation. For the remaining time, we're now opening it up for public comments and questions.
Thank you, Tina. Appreciate that. So before we field any questions, either in person or online, I do want to acknowledge 2 more individuals. From the city of Cudahy, we have Mayor Elizabeth Alcantar. Additionally, we have Council Member Daisy Lomeli. So thank you for joining us tonight. And lastly, I also want to take another opportunity to thank Assemblywoman Garcia for her leadership and for dedication to this community. Without her efforts, the funding that was secured for what we discussed earlier for the midterm improvements wouldn't be possible. So thank you again. All right, so with that, I saw a hand in the back. What is your question? Let me see if we can send you a mic. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ana Maria Quintana. I'm the Vice Mayor here at the City of Bell. First of all, thank you for coming to our city and giving us this presentation. Everyone in the community knows that the 710 is definitely one of our biggest nightmares, quite honestly. Not just because of the level of contamination that takes place, but it really is something that we live in day in and day out. So that being said, we are very grateful for the repairs that are being taken place. But the bigger issue that we want to address is the safety of the 710. If you look at the configuration of the Florence Boulevard exit, it is extremely dangerous, quite honestly. There's only 1 lane on each side. And if you look at the configuration with Firestone Boulevard, they have 4 lanes on each side. I, for one, when I took office in 2011, was surprised to see that there are maps already and plans already in place to build the Florence Boulevard exit exactly the same as the Firestone. So my question is, one, is there any likelihood anytime soon that this will be revisited? Because obviously, if back in 2010 you recognized there was a need, then when are we going to bring it back? And then secondly, are all those improvements going to hinder that development? Because it's no surprise, sometimes when you develop these things, it kind of pushes other projects back, right? And are those two projects incompatible?
Sure, thank you for the question and the comments, appreciate that. As my chief deputy acknowledged earlier, safety is a priority for the department. In fact, it's our chief strategic goal. So that's why we're here tonight, is to acknowledge you and to understand and to reiterate the fact that we understand that there is an opportunity for us to enhance safety. So with that, the short-term improvements that I personally spoke about, those are things that we're doing now, and those aren't going to be incompatible with anything that we're planning for the future. The improvements that Sumay mentioned a few moments ago with regards to what we call the midterm improvements or intermediate improvements, those are things that we certainly can accomplish within the earmark that was provided through the Assemblymember. Now, what the long-term improvements were that Tina spoke about, I think that kind of speaks to the reconfiguration of the interchange to make it maybe a little bit safer in terms of how it's actually configured presently. So we're looking at this really as a three-pronged approach. Something we can do today, something we can do basically tomorrow, and something that we're doing long-term. And for the long-term, there'll be plenty of opportunities to engage the community throughout that process to make sure that we're implementing a transportation solution that will meet the community's needs. So that's why we're here tonight, as kind of to better understand where you're coming from so that we can provide that good solution for you. That being said, the question was really about the long-term solution. I don't know if Tina, you want to say anything or not?
So, thank you for your question and thank you for attending. This long-term improvement project, the studies will start in July of this year, and the project initiation document will have to be completed before June 30th of 2023. And as this is a long lead project, it does require some extra time and coordination with external partners and doing environmental studies. So that does require some extra time, but the bidding for construction for either improvement options, whether it's an interchange reconfiguration or possibly a bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing, that would be in the year 2029 or 2030. But with these short-term and mid-term improvements that Rafael and Sumay have presented here today, these are made to address the concerns of safety as soon as possible. We recognize that the long-term improvements are going to take some time to actually come to fruition. So,
Did that address your question?
So you're saying that for another 10 years, in 2030, 2029, 2030, that's when the long-term projects are going to be envisioned?
yes, at this time, due to the expected time frame for environmental, and it's possible that there needs to be right-of-way impacts that are studied and mitigated. And so that does require some time to work with the local jurisdictions and property owners to ensure that we are taking the steps that we need to create a project.
And to address the other portion of your question too, in terms of whether or not the alternatives would be, or the different projects would be compatible or not, it's a little too soon to say because we don't know what the ultimate solution will be like in terms of whether it's a drastic reconstruction like the example she cited from the Bay Area, or if it's going to be some other modifications that will be maybe more compatible with the midterm improvements. But certainly, as we're here now, we're working on this today, so this is something that we will deliver, especially the midterm project. That's something that we have funding for. We're working on that, so we anticipate to deliver the items that Sumay mentioned, and then that should bring a real improvement to the area. A long-term, right, it would be maybe preferred to have an alternative or a project like the ones that she illustrated from the Bay Area, but that's going to take, unfortunately, a little more time just because of the way the process is laid out, the way the funding is secured for those kind of things, and with the way that you have to conduct environmental analysis for that as well.
sorry to be back. I mean, it's 2022, 2029, yes, we need these. I mean, we're not gonna wait 7 years in order to be able to get these minor repairs, because they really are minor in comparison to the need here, right? Can you guide us and educate us a little bit of the funding? What is it that we as elected can do to try to, quite honestly, bring these resources? I mean, you're saying that it takes a long time. What funding is needed?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for offering assistance. The long-term project, we expect that to be able to fund that through our SHOP project, or those are basically state dollars that Caltrans receives for its normal operations. So with that, we expect to have funding for that, so I can't say that we need additional funding for it. It's just the matter of how the process is laid out, where you go into the planning phase, right? You work with the community, you identify some preliminary alternatives, then you go into the project report / environmental phase. So you do more detailed analysis there. You go out into the community, conduct an environmental document there. So that takes another year or so for that to happen. Then you go into design. I know it doesn't sound necessarily reassuring or comforting, but please rest assured that we are actively working on implementing a solution that will help the community. Because as we've all mentioned here, we really care about safety. It's not just a word that we say. You know, I'm wearing a cone here with a ribbon. I used to work in the field myself, so I as an employee, I understand what it means to be in a safe environment versus not. So, you know, we're here because we really care about safety, and we're trying to make things better at that location.
That's fine. I would be remiss without acknowledging Assemblymember Cristina, Garcia, and Speaker Rendon for the work that you've done thus far. It's a big hurdle, but again, the need is great, and definitely the desire to advocate on behalf of our communities there. So please keep us informed, because quite honestly, 10 years to wait for something that has been recognized as a need 20 years ago is a little frustrating for us.
And so I wanted to add, part of my opening comments was, like you, I saw the improvements on the Firestone exit and was aware that at some point Bell Gardens is on the list. But when I made the initial phone calls, it was way more than 10 years that we were gonna have to wait. And so it was at that point that I spoke to Caltrans about what we needed to do to get both balls rolling, the short term and the long term. And the reality is that waiting 8-9 years for the long-term solution feels inadequate when you've been all your life thinking you're gonna die when you go down that street. But we are finally starting the process, and we are working as judiciously as possible to push to ensure that this becomes a priority for Caltrans, which is why they're here today. And so I think this is that first step of making sure that they're here, and that they're here in a way that's going to be community-driven as well for the solutions. And so the commitment is, and has been, that this will no longer just sit on the shelf like it's been sitting all those years, as you pointed out.
So any other questions from the room, or perhaps we can take one online if we have one? Okay, looks like we have a question online. The question is, are there short or long-term plans to fix potholes on the off-ramps and on-ramps for 710 freeway between Bell and East Los Angeles? The short answer would be yes, but that's really a maintenance matter, and if I look at my colleague there, I think we understand that we have an opportunity there to enhance the pavement. And with that, he's heading over in my direction. So again, let me introduce to you my esteemed colleague, Mr. Gatsun Okereke. He's the Deputy District Director for the Division of Maintenance at Caltrans District 7. Gatsun?
Hi, good evening. It's nice to be here. My name is Gatsun Okereke. I'm the Deputy District Director of Maintenance here in Caltrans District 7. Fixing potholes is something we do every day, so as we identify them. So it won't take as long as you're worried about. So now that it is mentioned, we'll look into that. And I would like to get who has the question. If there are specific locations, it can always be sent over to us, and we'll follow up with that. However, we do have different classes of pavement rehabilitation. We do have projects, and then we do have those that are done by state forces. So this request seemed to me like something that can be done by state forces. So it is something we can handle very quickly. Thank you. Rafael?
Thank you, Gatsun. I think there was another question in the audience. Yes.
Are you also in charge of the graffiti cleanup?
Yes,
Is there any way we can have your number so whenever we see something, we can call you?
you can always call me, but graffiti is something we clean all the time. And as you know, as we clean, we come right back. But we do have dedicated teams that are going out regularly and ensuring that we try to remove the graffitis on our highway system. So you can always call.
What number do we call?
What's our public? CSR number? Yes. We do have a community service support number and website that will be made available to you. You have that? Okay.
Since he's here now, thank you, Godson. Any other questions related to maintenance, graffiti, those kind of things? All right, doesn't look like it. Thank you, Godson, appreciate it. All right, looks like we have another question from WebEx. It says, will Caltrans staff look into opportunities to fast-track the safety improvements for the 710 and Florence Avenue Interchange Improvement Project by securing funding from the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act? So that's an excellent question. The short answer is we'll look at all opportunities available to us to expedite the delivery of this project. So whether it's this or whether it's other opportunities, you know, as was mentioned earlier, when we think about the timeline, when we think about it's going to take another 7-8 years to realize these improvements, that doesn't sound good. You know, I'm a consumer, I'm a resident as well. So we will strive, as Assemblymember Garcia mentioned earlier, to deliver these improvements sooner than possible than we're stating now. But at this point, that's the time frame that we have, and if we find opportunities to expedite, we certainly will. Any other questions from inside the room here? Any other questions from inside the room here? Okay. Any other questions from WebEx? Are we good? Okay. All right. So far, it doesn't seem like we have any other questions. Please keep in mind that our goal here is to be continuously engaged with you. So if you happen to, if you're home already, if you happen to be at home and think of a question that you could have asked, should have asked, please feel free to email peter.jones@dot.ca.gov. That's the email there that's shown on the screen. And we'll certainly get back to you and provide you the appropriate response. Okay, I think we might have another question that just popped up. Okay, so this is, the question is, are there any future long-term plans to improve Gage and Slauson Avenue bridges? So I think we probably need a little bit more detail with that with regards to what specifically needs to be improved about those bridges. But I have your name here, so if you could, I believe, if I could correct me, the chat's private, correct? Yes? Okay. So to the individual that shared this question with us, if you could email this question to peter.jones@dot.ca.gov, we'll be able to provide you with specific information with regards to what the plans may be for those specific bridges at Jerry Avenue and Slauson Avenue. But thank you for the question. All right, so I do have a public service announcement of sorts. If anybody is interested in graffiti removal relating to Caltrans, you may call 1-800-675-4357. Again, for graffiti removal, please contact 800-675-4357. If you weren't able to jot that number down, again, Peter Jones, popular, good fellow, you can email him and we'll provide that number to you. Additionally, Peter Jones is available at area code 213-500-6985. Again, area code 213-500-6985. Thank you, Peter. Okay, so we still have time, and we'd love to field any questions or address your comments or concerns with regards to this or other locations. But looking around the room, it doesn't seem like there's any other questions. And anything from WebEx? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse my language because I'm lacking the word. In terms of these areas around, or, no, how to call them, islands? Ramps, these islands. Is there any prevention for homeless encampment? Anything prepared for that or anything in mind for these areas?
Certainly, with regards to the first part, with regards to what we're talking about, we're talking about pedestrian and bicycle safety for the most part. That being said, that's obviously a consideration for a lot of communities, and I will defer that answer to my colleague with regards to what our specific plans may be with regards to addressing that issue. Godson, if you can come back.
Okay. I'm going to address homeless encampment generally. We do constantly monitor some of these locations, and we do try to put landscape or hardscape, things that dissuade or tend to prevent camping from beginning to grow at those locations. And homeless encampment is something we're dealing with as a society that has been made worse by the pandemic. But Caltrans has dedicated lots of resources to the removal. We have a process in place to make sure that the people experiencing homelessness are also treated with dignity. So we do have a program. We work with local continuums and local communities because Caltrans doesn't have housing. But when we work with the local communities, like LASA and the other similar care entities, when the individuals are relocated, then we can go in as Caltrans and do the cleanups. And then when we do cleanup, we work very closely with law enforcement, CHP, in some cases sheriff or local police, and our staff as well to continue to monitor those locations as much as possible. So this is just to address homeless encampment as a whole. But if there are specific issues or concerns, we can also call the same number, the 897-3676 is area code 213, or to our CSR website that could be made available to you. If you send your request to the same Peter Jones at dot.ca.gov. So we have an elaborate structure for handling homeless encampments on Caltrans highway right-of-way. But we try to work very closely with our local communities to achieve that because it's a very daunting task, I must say. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Assemblymember Garcia and Speaker Rendon for the attention brought to our area. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Godson. Appreciate that. Any other questions, WebEx or otherwise? Okay. Well, we're still here, and as I mentioned earlier, if you think of a question when you go home, feel free to email Peter. Peter, you want to say, wave your hand? That's him there. Nice fellow.
They're sending everything to you. Everything to Peter Jones.
He has a direct line to us, so he can find us 24/7. Yes.
Can you please talk about next steps?
Sure. So the next steps, as I mentioned, let's take them one at a time with regards to the various projects that we talked about earlier. So let me. Okay. So in terms of the next steps, right, if we consider the short-term improvements, those things that are things that we're working on actively right now. Those are things that we anticipate completing within the next few months, depending on how quickly we're able to procure the signs that, as I mentioned, we've already ordered those. In terms of the midterm improvements, those are the improvements Sumay talked about. Those are things that we're going to be initiating a study. I don't know that we have the specific details right now, but I anticipate we're going to begin the study probably as soon as July with regards to this particular project. So normally this would be it starts in the planning phase, as I mentioned, that goes into the design, environmental phase and design, et cetera. So we were going to look to expedite the planning and the environmental phase, and we anticipate that's going to start sometime later this year. And when that happens, there'll be opportunities for us to re-engage you with regards to what those short-term improvements will look like. Additionally, as was mentioned earlier by Tina, we're going to be starting also the long-term improvements, so those are on parallel tracks. And so with that, there'll be also plenty of other opportunities for us to engage you, to solicit your input and feedback with regards to what that solution might look like, whether it's something as involved as what we showed for District 4 in the Bay Area, or whether it's something completely different. But those are the next steps, and if you have any questions with regards to the timeframes, with regards to what the process might look like, feel free to reach out to Peter. As I mentioned, he'll reach out to us, and then we can be in touch with you as well. It's probably just simpler just to take the one number down, and then he'll find us, and we'll find you afterwards to connect with you. Any other questions with regards to next steps? Did we have anything from WebEx? No? All right. Okay, so I think the question was, can we share the presentation? Yes, we can make it available. If you're interested in the presentation, please provide your email address in the chat, and we'll share it with you. And for those that are here present at the community center, we do have some printouts as well. But if you would like an electronic version, please make sure that you share your email address with us, or again, you can email Peter Jones, and we'll share that presentation with you. All right, so it doesn't appear that there are any other questions either through WebEx or online, and thank you, I did receive an email address there. But we're here, we're happy to stay here and answer any other questions you may have. So since there doesn't appear that there are any other comments or questions, I think we can stand adjourned, and I'd like to thank again all the elected officials and the respective offices that participated. And I want to acknowledge again Assemblymember Garcia for her leadership and dedication in making certainly the midterm improvements possible. So with that, thank you as well for taking the time to be with us tonight, both in person here. I know it's difficult, especially with COVID, and I'd like to thank you all at home as well, connecting with us through WebEx. We look forward to continuing the dialogue for the improvements here, and look forward to working with you as well. So with that, thank you again, and be safe. Take care.